Imagine standing on the stage of your life, at the very peak of your career, yet feeling a storm raging inside you that no one can see. At just 35, Jonathan McReynolds, a man whose music has inspired millions, broke down in tears over a revelation that stunned everyone who knows him. You won't believe what finally brought him to this moment of raw, unfiltered emotion. This isn't just a story about music or fame, it's about faith, truth, and a hidden struggle that no one expected. At 35, Jonathan McReynolds is a name that resonates across the gospel music world, a man celebrated for his soulful voice, his heartfelt lyrics, and his unwavering devotion to faith. But behind the spotlight, behind the applause and chart-topping hits, there was a story few ever knew. In this video, we're diving deep into the moment that shook Jonathan to his core, a revelation so personal, so profound, that it brought him to tears, a side of him the world has rarely seen. You won't just hear the headlines, you'll understand the struggles, the fears, and the inner battles that even his closest fans never imagined. We'll uncover the emotional journey that led him here, the shocking truths that left him vulnerable, and the turning point that changed everything. By the end of this story, you'll see Jonathan McReynolds not just as the singer, not just as the performer, but as a human being confronting his deepest truths. And just when you think you know the whole story, the moments that follow will leave you speechless. This is where the unbelievable begins. Jonathan McReynolds didn't just appear on the gospel scene overnight. From a young age, music was more than a hobby. It was a calling. Born and raised in Chicago, Jonathan grew up surrounded by the sounds of gospel choirs, church organs, and soulful voices that spoke directly to the heart. But what set him apart wasn't just his talent, it was his ability to blend traditional gospel with a contemporary sound, making faith feel both intimate and relatable to a new generation. By his early 20s, Jonathan was already turning heads. His first album wasn't just well-received, it became a defining moment for modern gospel music. Critics praised his lyricism, his smooth delivery, and, most importantly, the authenticity that radiated from every note. Fans weren't just listening, they were connecting. They saw themselves in his struggles, his prayers, and his reflections on life, love, and faith. Yet, as his fame grew, so did the pressures. The music industry, even within gospel circles, is not without its challenges. Long tours, constant public scrutiny, and the expectation to always remain perfect in faith and character began to weigh heavily on him. What the world saw, a composed, inspiring, uplifting artist, was only one side of the story. Behind closed doors, Jonathan was grappling with doubts, insecurities, and questions about his path, his purpose, and even his relationship with God. And this inner conflict would eventually lead to a revelation so personal, so emotional, that it would break him down in ways no one could have anticipated. But what was this revelation? How did it surface after years of success, praise, and recognition? That's what makes the next chapter of his journey impossible to ignore. For years, Jonathan McReynolds carried a weight that few could see. On stage, he smiled, sang, and lifted spirits with his music. Offstage, however, there was a quiet struggle that gnawed at him, a tension between expectation and reality, between public image and private truth. And then, at the age of 35, something happened that forced it all into the open. It wasn't a scandal in the traditional sense, nor a dramatic industry betrayal. It was something far more intimate, far more human. During a candid interview, Jonathan revealed a deeply personal experience, a revelation about his own life, faith, and the pressures of constant perfection. As he spoke, his voice trembled, his eyes welled up, and for the first time, the world saw the vulnerability behind the music. He spoke about the pressure to constantly appear strong, the invisible burden of being seen as a role model in every circumstance, and the moments of doubt that haunted him despite his faith. Jonathan described how expectations from fans, peers, and even from within himself began to feel like chains, limiting not only his personal freedom, but also his spiritual growth. And then came the confession that left everyone stunned. Jonathan admitted that there were times he questioned his path, moments where he felt unseen, unheard, and even misunderstood in his ministry and music career. It was a moment of raw honesty, a tearful acknowledgement that being a public figure in gospel music doesn't shield one from pain, struggle, or emotional exhaustion. Listeners around the world were shocked. How could someone so seemingly grounded, so spiritually inspiring, be carrying such hidden weight? His tears weren't just about personal struggle. They were a mirror reflecting the hidden battles many face in silence, the kind of pain that fame, talent, and faith alone cannot erase. And just when it seemed the revelation had reached its emotional peak, Jonathan hinted at something even deeper, something that not only affected him, but also challenged the very foundations of his career and his understanding of his role in the world of gospel music. What he shared next would leave fans, friends, and fellow artists questioning everything they thought they knew about him. It was a moment that blurred the line between celebrity and human, between inspiration and vulnerability, and it changed how the world would see Jonathan McReynolds forever. After that tearful revelation, the world saw Jonathan McReynolds in a way few ever had: vulnerable, honest, and profoundly human. But behind the headlines and social media reactions, the real story was only beginning. What does someone do when their private struggles are suddenly on public display? How do you reconcile faith, fame, and the very personal truths you've carried for years? For Jonathan, the days that followed were a mixture of reflection, prayer, and deep introspection. He retreated from the public eye to process the weight of what he had shared, understanding that this moment was not just about emotion, but about transformation. Those closest to him described a man grappling with the profound realization that vulnerability could be a source of strength rather than weakness. He began revisiting his music with a new lens. Songs he had written years ago took on new meaning. Lyrics that once felt like expressions of inspiration now became declarations of survival, of honesty, and of human imperfection. Every note, every verse, every chord resonated differently, both for him and for the fans who listened with renewed attention. And yet the journey was not simple. Jonathan faced an internal tug-of-war, the instinct to retreat back into perfection versus the courage to embrace authenticity. There were moments when doubt threatened to overwhelm him, when questions about his purpose and calling loomed larger than ever. But it was precisely through these struggles that he began to find clarity. Fans began to respond in ways he had never anticipated. Messages poured in from people who shared their own battles, their own hidden tears, and their gratitude for his honesty. It was a reminder that the impact of being real, of allowing yourself to be seen in your entirety, flaws, pain, and all, was far greater than any accolade or award. And then came the defining moment. Jonathan realized that this revelation, though painful, was a catalyst for growth. It wasn't just about coping with hidden struggles. It was about using them as a bridge to connect more deeply with his audience, to inspire not just through music, but through shared humanity. He began openly addressing mental and emotional health, spirituality, and the importance of self-acceptance in interviews and public appearances, topics rarely discussed in the gospel music scene with such openness. But the journey didn't stop there. Even as he embraced this new chapter, Jonathan hinted at yet another challenge, a decision that would test both his career and his faith in ways no one could have foreseen, a decision that would force him to redefine success, impact, and what it truly means to live a life of purpose. The question now was no longer about what he had revealed, but about what he would do next. How would Jonathan McReynolds turn this vulnerability into strength? How would he transform pain into purpose and doubt into determination? Following the revelation and the emotional turmoil that shook him at 35, Jonathan McReynolds faced a choice: retreat into safety or step boldly into authenticity. And what he chose would define not just the next chapter of his life, but also the future of his influence in the gospel community. Jonathan began to lean fully into his truth, understanding that the very struggles that had once felt like weaknesses were now his greatest strengths. He started engaging with fans on a deeper level, sharing stories of doubt, moments of anxiety, and the unseen battles that accompany a life in the spotlight. His social media posts became more than updates. They became lifelines for people wrestling with similar challenges, people who felt invisible, unheard, or overwhelmed by expectations. At the same time, Jonathan's music began to evolve. New songs reflected this period of self-discovery and transformation, combining soulful melodies with lyrics that were vulnerable, honest, and relatable. Tracks that once centered purely on inspiration now carried an emotional depth that resonated universally. Fans who had followed him for years felt a renewed connection, recognizing a man willing to lay bare his humanity while still lifting hearts and spirits. This transformation wasn't limited to his art. Jonathan also began speaking publicly about mental health in faith-based contexts, a topic often overlooked in the gospel community. He addressed the pressures of ministry, the weight of expectations, and the importance of self-care and honest communication with God. In doing so, he not only redefined what it means to be a modern gospel artist, but also set a precedent for transparency and authenticity in spaces where vulnerability is often hidden. And yet, even with this newfound clarity, Jonathan hinted at future challenges. He admitted that walking this path was not easy. Authenticity comes with its own trials. Criticism, doubt, and misunderstandings inevitably followed. But unlike before, he approached these obstacles with resilience, informed by the emotional breakthrough that had reshaped his perspective. By confronting his fears and embracing vulnerability, Jonathan McReynolds achieved something far more profound than chart-topping hits or awards. He became a symbol of courage, demonstrating that true strength lies not in perfection, but in the willingness to face your truth, share it openly, and allow it to inspire others. And perhaps the most remarkable part of this transformation is the ripple effect it created. Fans began sharing their own stories, inspired by Jonathan's honesty. Fellow artists expressed admiration for his courage. Entire communities started to engage in conversations about mental health, emotional honesty, and faith with a new level of openness. One man's vulnerability became a beacon of hope for countless others, proof that even the most public lives carry private struggles, and that embracing them can spark change far beyond what anyone imagined. Jonathan's journey reminds us all of a simple yet profound truth. The path to greatness is not measured solely by achievements or accolades, but by the courage to face our inner battles, the willingness to show our humanity, and the commitment to use our story to uplift and connect with others. As he looks forward, Jonathan McReynolds continues to create, inspire, and break barriers, not just in gospel music, but in the way faith, vulnerability, and authenticity can coexist to redefine what it means to lead a meaningful life. Jonathan McReynolds' journey is a reminder to us all that behind the bright lights, the applause, and the accolades, there is a human being navigating doubts, fears, and moments of profound vulnerability. At 35, his emotional breakdown wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a testament to the strength it takes to face one's truth, to confront inner struggles, and to embrace authenticity in a world that often demands perfection. We've seen Jonathan rise from a young, talented gospel singer in Chicago to an internationally recognized artist whose music touches hearts and uplifts souls. We've walked through the pressures of fame, the hidden struggles behind his smiling performances, and the tearful revelation that changed everything. And we've witnessed the transformation that followed. A man who turned his vulnerability into purpose, his struggle into inspiration, and his personal truth into a message that resonates with millions around the world. But what makes this story truly remarkable isn't just the emotional breakdown or the public revelation. It's the courage to continue, to lead with honesty, and to show that strength is not about perfection, but about embracing your humanity. Jonathan McReynolds has redefined what it means to be a modern gospel artist, someone who doesn't just sing about faith, hope, and love, but lives it openly, transparently, and courageously. For fans, aspiring artists, and anyone struggling with unseen battles, Jonathan's story is more than inspiration. It's a lesson in resilience, authenticity, and the transformative power of vulnerability. It reminds us that our struggles, when faced head-on and shared with courage, can spark connection, healing, and growth not just within ourselves, but in the lives of others. So, what can we take away from this moment? First, that it's okay to be vulnerable. Second, that authenticity resonates more deeply than perfection ever could. And finally, that even in moments of fear, doubt, or tears, there is potential for incredible growth, purpose, and impact. If Jonathan's story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on your own journey, make sure to show your support. Like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your reflections matter, just as much as his story does. And don't forget to subscribe, because we'll continue bringing you the stories behind the headlines, the moments of truth, courage, and revelation that the world doesn't always see. Jonathan McReynolds' journey is ongoing, and this is only the beginning of a new chapter, one that promises more lessons, more inspiration, and more moments that will touch your heart.